everybody, welcome back to Pagan's Reading Nook. My name is Pagan, and today I'm joined by one of the coolest people I know, and that is my best friend and also my writing partner, JT Baxter. JT, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to be here.
For those of you who probably don't know who JT Baxter is, allow me to introduce you. JT is my writing partner, who's also been my best friend for, God, like 5+ years. We stopped counting after a while, but has recently decided to go from ghostwriting into the publishing scene. And we wrote a story that, if you have read my book, Fictional Musings, you would know the story fairly well, hopefully. And that is her Monstrous Fate. It's the spicy Greek mythos story that is in there. We decided to actually take that story and expand it, make it bigger, make it better, make it more awesome. And now it is published on its own, and it is the new book that the two of us have out together, and it is available everywhere, so you can go and check it out. But unlike a lot of the traditional episodes on this show, we're actually going to be talking about a book I also wrote with JT and some of the other really awesome stories that we're working on together that are all super spicy. So if spicy is not your scene, that's okay. This episode may not be for you, and that's totally fine. But we're going to be talking about that. So I don't remember. How did we come up with the whole satyr story?
That's a good question. Um, I think it was just we were thinking of monster stories in general and just writing ideas. I feel like the satyr one, like the satyr fawn one, wasn't one that we actually wrote down, though.
I think you're right. Actually, I
Um,
think Kate Prada might have inspired it because we were talking about how there's just not enough horns in monster romance, especially the
yeah,
grabbing of the horns. And
yeah,
uh, I think we said, oh, we should totally write one of those. And lo and behold, I think that's how it came into being. But interestingly enough, we chose not to do like straight satyr, because if you understand the mythos of satyrs, they're kind of violent, overly sexual, um, very not great characters. But fawns, on the other hand, are still sexual beings, but they're a lot nicer. So we decided to kind of combine the two of them. So you still get that buff, scary looking satyr dude, but also with the gentleness of the fawn. And that's where Alsteus came into being. And Alsteus is such a really fun character because he didn't strike me originally when we were writing it as a character that would be as gentle as he was. I expected him to be a lot more stoic and gruff than we wrote him to be. And he turned out to be so loving and such a great mate. And, just so amazing. I'm so proud of the way that he turned out to be. And especially in the new version, he's so loving and just wants to make Deanria, and the fact that they are just so loving together as a couple and the fact that they're fated mates. I absolutely loved writing her. She was amazing to write and such a interesting character in the way that she kind of came into being. For those who haven't read the story, there are some trigger warnings about her introduction to Osteus. So make sure you pay attention to the trigger warning page because it can be a little triggering. It's a little dark, it's a little twisty. We have the king who's very Joffrey like in Game of Thrones status, so
yeah.
he wasn't that great. It was fun watching him kind of cower the way he did. Um, what was your favorite part about writing Osteus and Daenerys' story?
Um, yeah, I think it's interesting, like what you were saying about Osteus and how he became the character he was. Because if you remember, when we were first throwing the idea around, he was going to be a Minotaur. It was a Minotaur I suggested originally,
Oh, right, yeah.
because the Minotaur is like a big thing in Greek mythology. Um, but then we kind of thought, well, Minotaurs are technically, you know, they're a bit more aggressive,
Mm-hmm.
and you've got the legend of Theseus and the Minotaur anyway. So we went down the satyr Thorn route. But yeah, it was interesting. In the original story, it was, I don't know how to describe it. Just it was something I'd never written that kind of character before, like a Greek mythological character like that. But then, obviously, in the new one, in the standalone, we put so much more into it, more scenes that really round out who Osteus is as a character,
Hmm.
and what his personality is like as well. Like he's not just this big, strong brute that you would expect that kind of character to be. He's got the honor, and he's got, there's a little bit in the beginning where he kind of hears his mother's voice and he listens to that in his head, and so just writing him from the perspective of not being what you would expect, like this big brutish being,
Hmm.
and him having that softer side, like you said, um, was kind of a challenge, but was also a fun challenge as well.
It was a fun challenge to write, and the cool thing about the standalone too is we did such a really great job with the building and the fact that there are so many other creatures within this world that could have their own standalone stories. I remember when we were working on it, there was the one scene that he mentions of like you don't want to be in these woods after the dark because there's things that come out that are not very nice and something to that effect. And uh, immediately I was like, I want to know what are the things in the dark that we just wrote about because we just leave it at
Yeah.
that. We leave it elusive, and so I don't know. Maybe there will be a things in the dark kind of story that comes out of this one, and there's so many other really great things too. Like I believe in the beginning in the other story we briefly mention, um, like a very small blessing from Aphrodite at the very end. I think is where it was mentioned.
Yeah.
And in the new one, Aphrodite gets her own kind of chapter where they pay her
Mm.
homage and all this other
Mhm.
stuff. And the cool thing about her being in the story was I was looking up, traditional offerings for Aphrodite because if you listen to my sister podcast, Pagan's Witchy Corner, you'll know that we talk about all the witchy cool stuff over there. But I wanted to make sure that I was getting it correct. And when we had the cover designed, I was like, there's no way we're going to be able to fit Osteus on this cover because of the way that he is described in the book and the way he looks. There's no
Yeah.
imagery out there that will match him unless it's AI generated, which we
Yeah.
didn't want. And so I was like, let's do flowers of some kind and give it kind of this, beautiful kind of cover to kind of describe their beautiful relationship. And when I looked at the offerings for it, Aphrodite's offerings are roses, and there's roses all over the cover. And I had never made that connection until after the cover was designed. So I was like, okay. And the fun thing about it too is when we were getting ready to send it off for publishing, I was like, Aphrodite needs like an honorable mention in this book. So she has one in I believe the dedication area because
Yeah.
she I think helped write this book a little bit, especially the scenes where she's getting paid homage for their relationship. So that was a really fun scene to write as well. It was also fun to kind of see the different action scenes that we wrote as well, the battle scenes, because I believe we
Yeah.
expanded those. I know we added one and expanded the other one, so that was a really fun thing to write. And
Um.
you wrote those, most of them.
y- Yeah. We added two actually. Yeah. We have. There's the one in the middle,
Right.
which is the one that's in the first version. Um. But we didn't really touch that. I felt that was exactly how it was fine the way it was written. But yeah, to expand it a little bit more and make it into the standalone book, we added more because when you think Greek mythology, again, it was a violent period in time.
Mm-hmm.
Was the history, but also a lot of the mythological stories, they're full of violence. They're not kids' stories as it is anyway. I mean, you think of the movies that have come out as well, um, based around like Greek mythology, like things that spring to the mind are like Clash of the Titans and things like that. you've got the monsters in there, and they're fighting the monsters, and they're quite violent. So I thought adding that to the world, especially for a character like Osteus, who is kind of reviled by the general populace
Hmm.
that he's surrounded by, there's going to be tension between the people, and aggression between them. So I thought just adding in a bit more um, confrontation like that would build up his character. And again, it shows in those scenes. I don't want to spoil too much, but there's, he has a way of being like, you're the ones who started this, basically, when they come for him. He gives them a choice before they start fighting to back down, because he knows either way he's probably going to win any fight he comes across. Um, but yeah, writing those is interesting. It's very, I have to go through it in my head as well.
Yeah.
The fight scenes, I have to visualize it. Particularly because when I get into that kind of writing, I'm very descriptive with it.
Hmm.
So it's basically, well, it's like when you're reading a book. When you're reading a book, you're always seeing what's happening in your mind. And that's how I do it when I'm writing as well. It's like, if they swing a sword at him like this, which way is he going to move? It's like, how would this play out on a TV screen, for instance? How would you see that um, on a TV? So how do you see it in your mind? And so, yeah, I visualize every step as I'm writing it. And then when I read it all back, I can see the whole scene in my mind, and it helps to just visualize it really as I'm writing it.
That makes the story a lot easier. And it's funny when you kind of are describing how you're supposed to be writing these scenes, how they play in your head and all that. It's interesting because the way I do write those scenes as well is I have to see them as a movie, and a lot of times I have music playing in the background because I
Mm.
can't write to silence. I'm weird like that. But for that and some of the other stories that I've written where there's action scenes, there has to be some sort of soundtrack playing to match that scene.
Yeah.
So I believe that there was a when we were kind of writing some of those scenes, I think that we actually used like this Greek kind of,
Hmm.
playlist that had like some big overtones to it, and it was really great and it worked out really nicely. But with those scenes in particular, it was really nice to also see that you got to see also the size difference between the men versus Osteos. And
Yeah.
Osteos is a big dude, like,
Yeah.
he's a satyr and a faun. We're talking like 8 feet plus. So he's a big guy. And, you know, I don't personally, if I was one of those dudes, I'd be like, no, I'm not taking you on. You are twice my size. You're going to hurt me. But
Yeah.
I don't know. Sometimes the men think that their egos know better. But I also really like the tagline that we used, which kind of describes basically the book in itself, which is sometimes the most noble of men turn out to be monsters. And it was interesting
Mm.
because the monster was not the monster in this. It was always the men that came through that were, the ones that were attacking him or trying to attack uh
Yeah.
Denaria. And so you got to see all of these different characters and see how they were playing out, and it made it really interesting to kind of reverse the roles a bit and see how they were able to go from it being, men are the best to actually monsters are the best because they're not the ones trying to kill everybody. I mean, some probably are, but in this case, Osteus was not the one that was trying to kill everybody. He was actually just trying to live his life, work, you know, take care of his girl. That's all he wanted to do. And
Yeah.
and it was interesting too because, she expected him to kill her or hurt her.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
instead he was like, "No, I kind of just want to make sure you're okay." And took care of her, and then they realized that they were fated mates and it was adorable, and they have like
Yeah.
a super spicy relationship, which is fantastic. So
Yeah. No, I think what you're saying about, Osteus not being, he is the monster, but he's not the monster of the story.
Hmm.
I think is definitely an important thing that comes across in this book, where, in a lot of books, the humans are portrayed as the good guys, um, which is natural because we're human after all, and monsters are tend to be fantasy creatures. But it always makes me think of, like, particularly if you're playing like a video game, um, or even in fantasy movies and television as well. You have like goblins and orcs and, things like that, and it's like they're always portrayed as the bad guys. But it's like, that's because we're watching them from the perspective of the human heroes,
Hmm.
and it's like, what d- does that is that everyone? Is every orc, is every goblin a bad guy? And I like delving into that realm of stories where, maybe there's an orc who's, a good guy and he's just trying to live his life, like Osteus is in this book. And it's just an interesting concept to think about. There's so many monsters and fantasy creatures out there that are portrayed, more often than not, as the bad guys, when they could have their own stories and actually be the good guys in their stories as well.
Yes, and that kind of segues us into, the other things that we're working on too, which
Mm,
we have one that I can't tell you much about the anthology, but I can tell you it's going to be in an anthology because the anthology has not been announced yet, but we're working on a Kraken pirate story that has
hmm.
the gender roles reversed. So, um, you're like,
Yeah.
what do you mean the gender roles are reversed? She's the Kraken, not him. So I'm gonna leave it at that and let you guys just wander and be, curious about that and know that that is upcoming. I believe the anthology, I think from everything I've read, is going to be out sometime in September. You guys will hear me talking about it on here. I also have many of the authors from that anthology on the show coming up soon. So we'll be talking lots about that. So you will, audience, you will be definitely in the loop on that. And then we have some other fun things that we're working on, which eventually the cool thing is JT and I are planning on taking all these little monster romance that we're writing and eventually putting them in a full book where you will have all the different stories in one place, but they probably will be standalones before that. And we have a lot of other ones that are in the works. We'll give you some teasers, which are like a dragon shifter,
Mm.
mind flayer. Let's see, there's the Kraken one, there's a demon one, maybe a Mothman one. We're still discussing that one, but
Yeah.
there's so many really great little stories that we kind of have kind of in the works that are going to be probably coming out in the next several months slash years. Uh, I believe the demon one was the demon and human one, or fallen angel and human, which was going to be a fun one. And I mean, we have so many ideas for all the monster romances, and we're not opposed to anybody suggesting some. So if you are listening to this episode going, hey, I would like a story about X, Y, and Z monster,
Mm,
suggest it. It might end up in the book. But yeah, I don't know why we decided to go with monsters. I think it was just more of um it would be fun, and then it blossomed into what it's becoming now. So there's a lot of
yeah.
little stories that are coming out of that. Well, I don't know if they're going to be little. Probably at least several novellas that will also end
Yeah.
up in one book. Which I'm not going to tease the title yet because of the fact that it's still very much in the works and it's a ways down the road. But just know there's more monster romance on the horizon, especially spicy monster romance, because I don't know if we could actually write a clean story if we tried. I know I
I
can't.
Yeah, I think at this point it would be very hard for me as well in to do that.
Even fade to blacks are hard for me because I'm just like, but spice and showing
Yeah.
what they're doing and the
Yeah,
building,
exactly.
and yeah, it's hard.
The wind blows the curtain, like, no, no, tell me what's going on. Pan back to the bed, thank you.
um which, you know, that and now my brain's just like, oh, you could totally try to do a fade to black and then somebody watching through the curtains, and I'm like, God, I read way too much dark romance.
Yeah.
Way too much dark romance. Um, now I don't know if are you still working on another story? I don't remember.
Um, Not really. I have I have a novel that I started writing years and years ago, and then I got really bad writer's block, and kind of stopped writing. And then I met you, and we started like writing stuff together, and that kind of rekindled it.
Hmm.
Um, I've never really gone back to that book. Um, I tell a lie. I've gone back to it, and I've kind of rewritten it up to the place I got. Like character names have changed and things like that. Um, but I've never progressed it from what it was getting into. And yeah, I should probably go back to it at some point and see if I could fix that up. But again, that was like before I got into writing spicy things as well. So that's a very clean story. But then when I've read it back, I'm like, oh, I could add spicy bits in here. So my brain is now keyed into like where could I add these things. So yeah, it's interesting. But no, other than the stuff like we're doing at the moment, there's nothing that I'm doing at present.
Wasn't the main character of the Kraken story, Killian, wasn't he one of the original names in that story that you changed?
Yeah, it is the original name. And well, that character was it was the main character from my novel. Was has changed names so many times. Um, but the last time I loaded it up, I was thinking to myself, what where was this name Killian come from? And I was kind of thinking like Killian Jones from the Once Upon a Time series. The Hook character is called Killian.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
but then I'm thinking, no, there's somewhere else I've seen this. And I loaded up that story, and literally the first words are like I can't even remember now. But yeah, he's called like Knight Captain Killian.
Oh,
Which I'm
okay.
thinking of changing again because it's changed so many times. But yeah,
Well,
that's
he's Killian is now the at least male character of the Kraken story.
hmm
Which I will tease the name of the Kraken story with you guys, which I believe is Sins of the Sea. So that we have officially decided on, so we can tell you that, but the
yeah.
actual anthology title and all of that, we can't tease that. Just know it's coming. That's all I can tell you. The rest of it is hush hush and
hmm
secret. Uh,
Yeah.
and eventually, yes, once the anthology is for charity. And once we have all that information, I will be talking about it on the show, so stay tuned for that. But when it comes to when the anthology itself has run its course and it is finished, we will be releasing the Sins of the Sea expanded version, which
Mm.
personally I am chomping at the bit to write, because with the anthology we only are allowed 10,000 words, and there's
Yeah.
so much world building that we've already put into this spicy story that I'm like, oh, please let me write more, please let me write more. I have like a whole opening scene where that's
Yeah.
already in my brain, and
It's
I'm like, oh, I don't have the words to write it for the anthology one. So the anthology one's just going to be a teaser. Basically, you're going to get a nice little tease of the story, but eventually, Sins of the Sea will be out on its own and will
hmm
be expanded and beautiful. And I don't know how long it will be, to be honest, because I have a lot of scenes in my brain that I cannot tell you if it
Yeah.
will be as long as Our Monstrous Fate or if it will be a lot longer, but you know, it's in my brain and it's
Yeah.
working.
We shall see.
We shall see. But yes, Killian and the other main character, who is Afira, are having a nice little time together on the beach right now. That's all I can tell you. So,
Yes.
teasers, no spoilers. So, um, since you are new to the writing scene and people obviously don't know much about you, where can people find you and follow you?
Well, I am JT Baxter, author, on TikTok, Instagram, and Threads. But just be warned, they are all very empty at the moment because, as you said, I am new to the not no I guess not to the author realm, but to the published author space, I would say.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, social media is not my strong point as it is. Um, so yeah, I've made those to like obviously follow other people in that realm of authors and whatnot. But yeah, when it comes to doing social media posts, I've got a lot to learn. But yeah, feel free to follow me on there and see the nonsense that I'll no doubt post.
Social media is hard on a good day for
Yeah,
everyone. The only reason I have a fairly decent kind of thing with Instagram is Canva because I do
mm,
these two shows and so I have to put up promotional content for them. But
yeah.
yeah, I don't know what I'm doing half the time with social media, so you're not alone. And honestly, I think that everybody that does social media doesn't know what they're doing. I,
This is true. Yeah,
yeah.
we just
And if you
we
do know
muddle
what you're
by.
doing, share the secrets because the rest of us are in the dark. So, um, but for everyone who's listening, Her Monstrous Fate is currently out and pretty much everywhere. You can get it on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Apple Books, uh, Baker and Taylor, Smashwords, so many other places. There's also a lot of library apps that have it for the digital aspect, at least. So you can definitely get that. If you do order a print copy, just know that sometimes the print copies do take a while to arrive because they are print to order. So they sometimes will take anywhere between 7 to 14 days, I believe, to kind of arrive. And I don't know exactly um how long that would take if it was being shipped internationally. I do know that they are shipped internationally and printed internationally. But yes, the also for the record, we uh, currently have the printed cover in matte. And it should have actually been done in glossy, but we can't change it until July. So if you do get it, just be aware that the colors of the cover are kind of muted because it was matte. And I honestly, when we were doing it, I thought that matte was going to be a better option. No, this cover
Yeah.
design was meant to be glossy, and I know that now.
Hmm.
But yes, after July 21st, I believe it will be changed to glossy. So if you want to get a print copy, then absolutely. If not, definitely pick up a digital copy between now and then to do that. Also, if you would like to know more about the short version and the other stories I have written, you can check out my other book, which is Fictional Musings. And that one is available on Amazon and pretty much digitally everywhere. It is not on KU, and neither is Her Monstrous Fate. And there's a reason for that. Personally, I think KU is great. I'm a KU subscriber, but Amazon has not done a great job taking care of its authors that are in KU, and I don't want to allow Amazon to abuse another author, including us. So
Hmm.
that's why it's not on KU, but it is still an affordable price. And if you cannot buy a copy, you can go to your local library, request either a print copy or go through their library services for digital books. And again, it is all there. So make sure you're checking both those books out. They're awesome because we wrote them. Well, I wrote Fictional Musings, which JT wrote Her Monstrous Fate in there. But Her Monstrous Fate, the two of us wrote, and it's also awesome. So make sure you check out both those books, get copies of them. Follow us on social media. My social links are in the show description, and it says follow me on social media. There's a nice little link at the bottom. And you can do that. The only other announcement that I do have for everyone is if you are interested in supporting the show monetarily, which not required but always appreciated, you can check out the updated and new and pretty coffee page, which is in the show description as well. So there's my shameless plugs, all the good stuff. Make sure you check out the books, follow JT, follow me, and We will see you all next time. So make sure you're taking care of yourselves, be kind to each other, and I will see you all next time. Bye, everyone.